Speed is an important stat in Star Rail because more speed means more turns, which means more energy regen and more skill points. But how much of it do we actually need? To understand that, we have to understand the mechanics behind speed first. And in Star Rail, there are a few terms that we need to be familiar with, which are the speed stat itself, action values, turns, and cycles. The speed stat obviously determines who gets a turn first, but it's actually more than that. And they actually all tie to this particular term called action values. Let me explain. Imagine your characters as runners running endlessly until the battle ends. To get one turn, a character must finish running one lap, and one lap in Star Rail is 10,000 units. Imagine that the speed stat represents how many units a character can run in 1 second. It's easy to calculate how much time a character needs to finish one lap or to get a turn. A 100 speed character will need 100 seconds, and a 200 speed character will only need 50 seconds. Say that there are 2 characters and 1 enemy with these speed stats. Let's see how the first few turns go. Zila, Natasha, and the enemy will finish one lap in 80, 100, and 125 seconds respectively. When Zila finishes her first lap, which means getting her first turn, Natasha and the enemy will need to run 20 and 45 more seconds respectively to complete their first lap or getting their first turn. On the other hand, Zila is already starting her second lap. When Natasha gets her first turn, the enemy still needs to run 25 seconds, and Zila only needs to run 60 seconds more for the second turn. When the enemy gets their first turn, Zila and Natasha need to run 35 and 75 seconds respectively, and the cycle goes on until the battle is over. With that example, I think it's pretty clear how to determine who goes next after someone's turn. Now that we understand the analogy a little bit better, now that we have the example, let's go to action values. Action values are basically just the seconds needed to complete a lap or to get a turn in that analogy. It's just a fancy way in Star Rail to say how much time the character needs to get a turn, and obviously it's influenced by the speed stat of the characters. Now you may be asking, what about characters speeding up or getting action advancement like from the dance light cone? Well, we're basically just increasing how fast the character can get one turn. So let's say that Zila has 125 speed and requires 80 action values to get one turn. Then let's say that an enemy with 40 action values takes a turn before Zila, which means that now Zila has 40 action values remaining. But then Zila suddenly gets a speed buff to 150 speed, and what this means is that Zila is running at a faster rate, and she only needs to complete 5,000 distance units remaining. And to run that far with 150 speed, she'll need around 34 action values. That's how speed up works. Advancement, on the other hand, makes the distance needs to be run shorter. Say that besides the speed buff Zila receives, she also gets a 20% advance forward. This makes the distance 2,000 units, which is 20% times 10,000 units, lesser, which means that Zila only needs to run 3,000 units left, and with a speed up of 150 speed, Zila only needs around 20 action values to get a turn. By this point, I hope that you already understand how speed works, but there is still one other term that is not discussed yet, and that is cycle. In Memory of Chaos, cycles are important because if you want to get 3 stars, you have to finish within certain cycles. What are cycles then? In our analogy, cycles are basically the time limit given to our characters. One cycle is almost always 100 action values, and how many turns our character gets in one cycle is determined by how much time or how much action value our character needs to get one turn. A character with 100 speed will need 100 action values to get one turn, so in one cycle they will only get one turn. On the other hand, another character with 200 speed will need only 50 action values to get a turn, so in one cycle they will get 2 turns. Simple. Note that I mentioned that one cycle is almost always 100 action values, but there is an exception, and that is the first cycle of every wave of enemies in MOC. The first cycle is always 150 action values. Now that we have gotten all of that out of the way, the ultimate question is, how much speed do we actually need? In a vacuum in MOC, it is easy to determine that. In MOC, we need to build 2 teams, and if we give the same number of cycles to each team to get 3 stars, we will either have 6, 8, or 10 cycles for each team, and this means that we will have an action value limit of 749, 949, or 1149. Why the additional 99 action values? This is because if we finish just before the new cycle starts, for example, we take 6.9 cycles, which means just before the 6th cycle ends, the game still considers that we only use 6 cycles. What we want to do is to squeeze in as many turns as possible for a character in these action value limits. But first, I'm going to show you how much speed you need to get how many turns in 6, 8, and 10 cycles. You can look at the numbers in this list and you can pause the video if needed. Now that we have a concrete idea of how much speed we need to get a number of turns, the question is, how much speed does a character need? Let me tell you that there is no one number for all characters, especially if you're using more complex characters like Jingyuan, where you want his speed to work in harmony with Lightning Lord. Another factor to consider is whether or not your team composition has speed up abilities or advanced forward abilities. But these numbers are my general rule of thumb. Note that these are my personal opinions, and I think that you would achieve a better result if you were to adjust the numbers based on your team composition and your playstyle. If you have any questions you want to ask, just leave them in the comments and I'll get to them. I am also planning to make a speed guide for each character, but let me know if you want to see that. Subscribe for more guides, and thanks for watching.